The following is a presentation of KSL Sports. First and 12. A total roundup of BYU and Utah football and the expanded Big 12 Conference. Brought to you by Macy's Grocery Stores. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
Hour number 2 of the program. Thanks for being with us. It is First and 12. Alex Kirry, Mitch Harper. Thanks for being with us on the program. Mitch, of course, hosts every week Cougar Nation, which, I don't know, has the win streak brought more people out, or is there some superstitious stuff going on, Mitch? How are the BYU fans reacting over the phones to the win streak so far? Are you getting a lot more folks who are getting out there and getting – I find that it brings out a lot of pessimistic optimism, but it also brings out a lot of like people who are like, "Told you," and you're like, "Okay, come on." You can't be everybody's uncle who thought BYU was going to go 12-0 this year. But I just wonder how Cougar Nation takes it during your weekly show, man.
They are very pessimistic, but one thing I have learned with the phone lines the last 2 seasons is that negativity always seems to blow up the phone lines, and there hasn't been much to be negative about, so it's been a little more calm as far as like just pretty much positive takes, and it hasn't been anything controversial, whereas last year 37-7 loss to West Virginia. We're backed up, and people are just wanting to sound off and fire everyone. Whereas that take, like, what do you really nitpick right now? You can't nitpick them much. They're pretty healthy. They're taking care of the ball, and there's so much to like. And it almost feels like some people are like, well, everything that I want is happening. I don't know what else to say other than go Cougs. And so it's been a lot of that. And
flip it to
it's been fun, though.
2 things. You can flip it to full rivalry mode. You can flip it to full rivalry talk, or change the name of the show to Ute Nation. You'll get that negativity vibe going on. It's fine. If you start getting. Speaking of the fire, I mean, I told you I went on X just because I was like, all right, I got to see how Utah fans are figuring this thing out, and the amount of like, no, you're an idiot, like among their own fans, like, no, you're an idiot, no, you're an idiot, and it's like, no, you think you know what you're doing, like, and I thought, oh my goodness, we've seen this before, but Utah deals with it so little, right? Like, I mean, the honest truth is that they do not deal with this that often, and it did not help yesterday. Let's kick off the second hour here with the Utah versus Houston game breakdown. This is where the meltdown continues for Utah and the fans who are surrounding this program that's been so successful for such a long stint of time. A 4-game losing streak is an absolute foreign territory for people here locally. So let's jump in here. It's your Utah game breakdown right now.
The Utah Utes post-game analysis.
Mitch, another head scratcher for Utah fans. I think that a lot of folks were going into this game saying, I don't feel good about this one. And you know what? I could see them losing this game. And I thought, there's no way. If there's a team you can get right with, because I get it. Look, TCU, that's a team that can be that is, like I said, a little bit schizophrenic with their quarterback Josh Hoover, who has success. I mean, the guy has a proven arm that can beat teams some week, and then other teams or other weeks can absolutely lose it for his own team. But you see the talent there, and TCU's got athletes. Houston's got athletes, but they just do not have it all together yet. And this is a program that everybody looked at coming in and did not think that they were going to be able to do much this year in conference. And frankly, I don't think any of us saw them getting a win over TCU. And then certainly the biggest shock of all is Utah losing their 4th game in a row. Down in Houston now against the Houston Cougars, they only put up 14 points. Isaac Wilson gets pulled after he's not able to manufacture more than just the 1 touchdown. The defense was trying its darndest, Mitch. It looked like they were really fighting this thing. That last interception just absolutely handed the game over. A 43-yard field goal. I thought, okay, maybe just send this thing to overtime. This team, the Houston, has no idea how to punch this thing in from 10 yards out. There's no way they're going to score on the Utes inside that overtime, but they got that pick and they got the field goal, and Utah's woes got even deeper this weekend down in Houston.
It did, and I really did not even entertain the idea of Utah losing this game. Coming in, I really thought this was the get-right spot just because I don't put much stock at all into Houston, and I thought once again a change of the offensive coordinator spot, it wouldn't be great long-term for the rest of the season, but I thought for 1 week there'll be an uptick in production, and initially there was with some of those early scripted plays with Keithy popping off a big 70-yard touchdown, but after that it was all downhill. And, what's interesting when you brought up earlier that Utah is not used to this, you're right. The last time I can remember Utah going on a losing streak like this was 2013. They had a 5-game losing streak in that one. That was year 3 in the Pac-12. But what was different then was you knew Utah was building in a transition, and they were still competitive. And you felt like, okay, they've gotten competitive in some of these games, and like long term, this is going to get really good. Whereas this situation feels like it's almost kind of like an end of an era in a way. It feels like. Now, you thought that a couple of years ago when they had some losses, and then they worked their way back into the Pac-12 title game, and look what happened. But this feels different, where Utah can't score. They can't really do anything right. The defense is doing everything they can, but they don't have the depth that we once thought they did. There's a lot of questions about Utah right now, and most notably at the quarterback spot. I thought coming into this year, Cam Rising or not, I thought the quarterback depth at Utah was the best it's ever been, and I was wrong. Isaac Wilson, I still think he's got a ton of talent, and I think he can be a heck of a player, but I understand the move to maybe make a switch to get that spark. Brandon Rose, though, looked like a liability, and, I don't know how you win a football game in a power conference with him. I mean, he played it was a tough spot for him to go into, but Utah lost a game where the opposing quarterback, Zian Chris, was 6 of 13 for 61 yards. They lost to a quarterback with that stat line.
Yeah. Well, and more importantly, from the rush, then you go, okay, so then how'd they lose this game? Well, they gave up 230 yards on the ground. Yeah. There were a lot of times where it didn't feel like they were stopping anybody. And on the flip side, Utah doesn't even run for a total of 100 yards. They get to 90 yards on the day. Mekhi Bernard, who had been having week-on-week success, even looked like he was just not everybody was flat. I mean, that's a guy who we talk with every week on our program with JJ and Alex, and you know what? He was absolutely, I mean, the way he put it, it was a shock, and he was devastated by Andy Ludwig being let go. That was his guy, right? And then it was like, okay, so what have you talked about with Coach Bajakian and what you guys are going to do? He goes, and this is on Tuesday, but he said, I'm going to be honest, I haven't had a personal conversation with him. We had a team meeting. It was a very desperate thing. And then on that same Tuesday, it was, okay, well, so what have you seen on film with this Houston team? I'm going to be honest, we haven't gotten into the film really that much yet because we've been just talking about execution of things we need to get better, and if we get ourselves right, we should be able to be good. It was despair on Tuesday, a couple of days after Andy Ludwig had resigned from the program, and that program's reeling. And when you saw Bajakian say, the system's the system, I think I looked at that and I went, oh, boy, that's not a good sign. I was hoping he was going to say, I got some real crazy plans here. I'm gonna blow this thing out. We got a lot of talent. Let's try some new stuff here and get this thing going. And Isaac Wilson, we're gonna cater his strengths. They said that, and then they didn't do anything to cater to his strengths. So it all looked the same, and that's the part I think that was very disheartening for Utah fans is to watch this thing. Utah goes for 300 yards of total offense. They hold Houston to 289 yards of total offense, but they still lose this game. It was just an ugly one too. The two teams can't even combine. They don't even combine for 600 yards total as the two groups together, and that's a bad spot because that usually you can count on Utah's defense, and they have given up a lot of rushing yards this season, and it is so unlike Morgan Scalley's guys. And I know it's a lot of young dudes, but man, they have a lot to figure out.
And I think what's surprising too, Alex, is Kyle Whittingham historically would probably love a 17-14 game, and more times than not, I'd always pick Utah to win those games. I think what's been noteworthy here in this 4-game losing streak is they've kind of lost that confidence that when things are against the wall they're against the ropes in the fourth quarter, they're going to have that confidence to pull it out. I'm not seeing that. It feels like they're getting a little bit nervous. They're getting tight. I mean, that pick late from Brandon Rose
bad.
to really get the drive to give possession to Houston. It just feels like Utah is getting nervous in the moment, whereas that was always kind of a calling card of these Kyle Whittingham teams when they were in the Pac-12 and building it up in the Mountain West, was that, yeah, you might have a rock fight game. That's fine for Kyle Whittingham. They're always going to find a way to win these games. I don't want to go to the extreme and say this is a low point in Kyle Whittingham's coaching career, but it's kind of in that same breath of back in his early coaching tenure at Utah in 2007 when they lost to UNLV 27-0, and that was a real turning point for his program to the point where now they become an annual, national conversation piece in college football. This feels like it's near that. I don't want to put it near that level, but I just, you and I following the Big 12, knowing what Houston has been the last year and a half, they've been a mess, and they have not held their heads high over much. And even when Willie Fritz is coming out and saying his team didn't play that great and they still won, like you would have thought if Houston's going to win this game, they had to play a perfect game. Even against this Utah team that's struggling, that wasn't the case, and I think that's what's concerning too in this.
Yeah, and they do the interview in the game after the game with Houston's kicker, and he's like, "Yeah, man, that's fun. Like I haven't made a winning kick in my entire career. I've had a long career too." And you're like, "Geez, stop saying all these things to make Utah feel worse." Willie Fritz is like, "We didn't play very good. We still beat Utah, man." And the kicker's like, "I never make field goals to win games. This is fun." It's like, dude, this is awful to hear. And wondering if it's whether or not it's the low point right now in the career for Kyle Whittingham and his overall career that's been phenomenal. I mean, they're going to put the statue up, at Utah for Kyle Whittingham when it's all said and done. The thing is that the way people are reacting right now, you and I forget because we have a longer view historically of how these teams have done here locally, but you forget that fans year to year, like this is unacceptable. They're like, this is the worst ever. You got to fire this guy, get rid of him. He's old news. He's not good anymore. He didn't have it. And I'm like, man, how people forget, but at the same time, the results aren't good, and to the point that you go, this is the truck stop conference that we were just supposed to hang out in for a minute before we got the big invite. Well, now fans are feeling absolutely desperate, and Utah is reeling. And now they go to the bye week, and then they welcome BYU up to Salt Lake. And I'm going to be honest, I was going back and forth with a couple fans on Twitter that are Utah fans. They go, "We lose this game 49-0. That was the actual quote that a guy told me. Utah loses this game 49-0. It feels like that Oregon game from last year already before it's even happened. And I thought, wow, that's not a good place for fans to be in right now for that game. And again, we're going to have a lot to talk about with that, but man, it's crazy.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely, I don't know if I'd say 49-0, but it's definitely possible that BYU could blow out Utah. Now, we've seen some underwhelming quarterbacks take down BYU. John Hayes, T.D. Croshaw, Brett Ratliff. Like, it's happened. But this, what's interesting, too, about Utah is just that I just don't know what they hang their hat on going forward. And you really thought Isaac Wilson, despite the losing, that he was going to give you these brilliant flashes that made you feel like, you know what, maybe this year wasn't the year you hoped, but, man, this is going to be the future. And that even took a hit on Saturday night when he gets benched in favor of Brandon Rose. And I'm a believer in Wilson. I still think he's going to be a really good player, but I think that and the losing, it's just got Utah fans feeling down and out right now. And look, I still think Utah is the type of team that at home could knock off an Iowa State and knock off a BYU maybe, but I don't know how though, because they can't score enough points and the defense can only do so much. You can't win games 7-3 every week, because that's what's kind of feeling like the territory, what it needs to be if Utah's going to win football games at this point.
Well, it's desperation at this point. But man, I also had like some BYU fans going, "Hey, Isaac Wilson, Aaron Roderick will develop you at BYU, man. Why don't you come over?" I've seen all of it. So, and then you have Utah fans going, "Yeah, go to BYU, dude. You're not even that good." I'm telling you, it brings out the weirdest in fans. So there's a lot going on, and there's a lot to talk about running up to that rivalry game, and we'll of course spend a ton of time on that going in the next couple of weeks here. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back. Let's listen to Kalani Sitake and his win over the UCF Knights down in Florida. He's now 3-1 in his wife's home state. So there you go. Kalani, the 2 time zone travel, not a problem. We'll jump in with Kalani next right here. It's 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone. It is 102.7 FM. It's KSL News Radio right here every Sunday. Mitch Harper, Alex Kirry will be right back.